Good day. Welcome to Precise Elements, where we investigate the depth of our imagination or our fantasy. In this part, we look at neo-platonic monism, the idea that there is only one God illuminating all worlds, and imagination formation. Now, we are going to play this little video again, and we would like that. Let's see if we can observe more clearly what is going on there. Come on, play now. There it is. Observe that while the sphere is turning, the buildings, which is turning through 360 degrees, are reflecting off of its polished surfaces. Now, this reflection of images of light of the surrounding buildings on the polished surface of this sphere is a very, very ancient image of projection formation. Let's see if we can come to some understanding in this video of the meaning of reflective formation in Neoplatonic monism. We are seeing, while the sphere is turning, moving images surrounding and reflecting upon the polished surface of the sphere as it turns or moves. What is our imagination? The fantasy or our imagination, the Divine Mother, the power of the creative principle, the power that expresses the creative principle, a living, self-conscious and conscious force that brings forth, expresses and shapes appearances out of infinite reality. We are in actuality participating within the creative formation of this projected psychological light reflection of figure and color, the building surrounding the turning sphere, and its harmonics of the whole ensemble on the screen, and the images we form while we look, forming true appearances. This moving reflection formation, let me just get me back on the screen. This moving reflection formation is a very ancient and enigmatic, meaning enigmatic is that it's a riddle. There's internal things that the image holds in itself, describing instantaneous image formation, a formation of the soul within our own perception. The Greek word for this kind of reflection of polished surfaces is katoptros, reflection of images, figures, and colors of polished surfaces from mirror reflection appearances. Moving reflections of color and figure bouncing off polished surfaces or off the surfaces of flowing water may be viewed in this presentation in three ways. The first, as a reflective light formation of appearances within the unity of our own perception. Secondly, as a higher order analogy of wholeness and the unity within the reflective formation of world-forming appearances and their movement in time. That this wholeness and unity in us is irreducible and is reflective of higher order harmonics, our own perceiving, forming projections, a flawless, self-forming, creative, rolling appearance formation, at once forming in us without any seams or breaks. Indeed, in terms of a higher dimensional psychological geometry, higher planes of geometry, and this is not algebraic geometry that we have today, because this is interconnected with the soul, and vibration or harmonics, we may say, this unity in us would be an instant formation reflection of our receptive imagination, not occurring in timed steps, but forming as a unity in us. For there is something living, creative, present within the through-wholeness of both external and internal appearances, images, connected in projection formation as we look. Looking and contact then therefore is a unity. We discuss contact in our first and second videos a little, and it's always an interplay with light, image, reflection, figure, light and reflection. For thus we form image, color and its movement at once and simultaneously within our consciousness. Hence, we may view reflective, imaginative assimilation and projection formation as a forming unity, beginning with our imagination, which is a unity within our perception. Thus, phenomenal appearances, the buildings around the square that reflects off of in the analogy of the polished surface, these phenomenal appearances of this play of light and image and formation, color, forming is analogous, is an analogy to the field harmonics of a pulled string of an ancient lyre, the three or four string instrument that we usually see Orpheus with, or the back-flying harmonics of a bowstring of Plutarch in 119 AD. A higher pattern, a higher plane or harmonic form and its formation. We accept the images thus forming within our world perspective as they are, that is, that it is, or that they are, but we have no knowledge of what it is, what it represents. Within this acceptance, we affirm the world of appearances indubitably, without doubt. May we say the corporeal, relative or phenomenal world is just as it appears to be to us. Thus we may say internal and external psychological reflective formation is an instantaneous, immediate forming unity. And this formation is, in addition, simultaneously reflective of ourselves participating within wholeness. Hence, we may rather think of our imagination, our fantasy, and our seeing as tethered within to a higher interior order of self-moving harmonic form, information, or pattern. Nothing artificial here. An exemplar or harmonic template, a reality indeed, of the complex harmonics of appearance formation, indivisibly subsisting within the totality of all of living, infinitely forming nature and wholeness. Thus we may understand the idea of ancient mirror reflection of light and color of surfaces, like the surfaces of water in the works of Thomas Taylor. We used him as an anchor, and then from there we came into modern views of Plato and so on and so forth. So it's a distillation of many works. we may understand the idea of mirror reflection as instantaneous projective imagination formation, which is supported by a considerable but little known and a vast body of epistemology and its mythology. This image of the reflecting sphere is also enigmatic of something else, for within the interior of it are hidden geometries, which we'll come to at a future time. It possesses in its interior a more simple and iconic geometry of a circle formed around a center point within equal radii. The center point, the origin of the ontological being of the circle and the sphere, without which both of these would have no subsistence. The center point. This is analogous to the immense principle of principles, of light, of illumination. The one monistic deity, God, its rays irradiating the whole of the world, throughout the whole of the world, the center of illumination and the formation of all worlds, the one, the very essence and unproceeding stability of world formation. Hence, Proclus in 450 observed with respect to the soul, for soul, says he, is a certain subordinate intellect revolving round an intellect prior to itself, a higher plane, formed to its image and participating in the divine irradiations, which participation is a celebration of this illumination. We will come back to the deeper meaning of this at a future time. The world itself, in all of its manifold manifestation, is a celebration of this principle of light, of illumination, for it is everywhere reflected through threefold being, life, and intellect of Plotinus. This is the same as Sit Sat Ananda, if we might make the direct link between these. With all these icons given, and the one in the beautiful picture next to our presentation, we may observe the following in our own looking. We do not see our memories, nor our understanding, nor our knowledge, or our imagination. And we do not see our own brains. We can see clearly someone else has a head on his shoulder, but we can't see his brain either. And the seer is ultimately seen by the witness. The through-Wholeness is everywhere, has the looker or perceiver at the very center. Yet all these aspects form in us and is present in our language as a unity. Things matter. Actual matter by itself appear not to possess of itself living imagination, movement of form, nor life, understanding, or memory, or seeing, or consciousness. For we say to see is to form, and seeing is creative formation in itself. That's what this presentation is about. But we do not see instantaneous movement of the perception of our souls of formation itself as it happens, such as when we look at the image next to the words here. We previously said things unseen are simply to be measured differently. Way back when Pythagoras was arguing with Socrates, he evinced that man is the measure of all things. And Socrates refutes him by demonstrating that it's intellect that is the measure of all things, looking inward to the good. Measure, from ma is the Sanskrit measure, the lost meaning of our fantasy or imagination. World formation and all the movements through it is divine measure, an expression of the divine. for this inward-looking investigation has the potential to bring forth new knowledge, said Socrates to him. If then, unseen, experience life, consciousness, unseen, but experience cannot be easily found in either matter, which is by itself rightly presumed to be unconsciousness, or its distant evolution, then how may all of these unseen forming aspects of nature be circumscribed and appear to be a unity in every human being or in every flower coming into the world? May we begin by saying that our psychological unity appear to be a self-moving reflection or likeness within the wholeness of all nature. For a flower, too, is moved to blossom by the same power or force of imagination. But what can we say about nature, of her images or forms that come and go, that are ever flowing, changing, decay, falling apart, death and renewal? If you'll stay with me, we are going to look at this little beautiful picture of the waves breaking on a beach somewhere in southern Africa. Isn't that beautiful? Wouldn't you like to be there? Now that is a beach. Look at all those waves coming rhythmically. Of our images, the images of nature or forms that come and go in flowing waters of new formation. A true repetitio forma, rhythm, is forming within and through wholeness itself. For men say there exists a greater wholeness to which we'll come to, ancient men. How shall we say that objective nature, lifeless, yields her laws to interrogation of the mathematician? And how shall we say this kind of nature, who prefers to be obliterated by use and misuse, brings forth that which is new from the tension of opposing forces? For if this is the case, that tension exists between opposites, such as between light and dark forces, for instance, that their resolution brings around new unification from strife, then we ask whether this nature that we see in this picture could be something other than what it appeared to be to us at any particular time. For our world may really be at any particular time an appearance of our looking, our consciousness, and the passions we have, and the principles we embrace. For as it appears, living knowledge drives the movement of nature, of things as we understand them, our looking and our world postulates. For it is that knowledge of being that is self-illuminating, which illumination is a de novo celebration, a new celebration of becoming, flowing becoming. How can such a thing be, I hear you ask? For how is nature, which has been proven with great mathematical precision to be the thing it is, how can it be living, interforming, a back reflection, a mirror image indeed of our own looking, let alone for it to be circumscribed by wholeness, the center around which it possesses its being interior to it? It seems to us that something actually living is opposing with its tension, this easy unconscious worldview indeed, and may require a different measurement and a new way of coming into the blossoming of this knowledge and its continuous movement or renewal. May we say that without tension, difference, and discomfort, man is lazy. We see the laziness today with the cupped hands. in front of, just shall we say, big buildings with huge pillars. Without tension and difference, brought through upheaval and the experience of the storms of life. New rhythms and their formation may be difficult to happen, such as the formation of these new waves breaking on the rocks is an example. Just like electromagnetic field tension, the potential difference between electrical charges, tiny torsion fields or instantly moving, and their constant motion lights a lamp, for instance, when I flip the switch. Hence, both difference and tension exists in motion, also in our psychology. If then we can neither see, nor feel, nor touch these automatic habits and their movement interior to our psychology, how shall we say they possess being? Would we say there is a greater being through which all psychological formations and their movements possess a subsistence? Indeed, that we have, in postmodern psychology, been able to come around to the ancient idea of participation is a miracle. Our beautiful world, the image next to the words, is not alone, is not cut off from intellect, from imagination and formation. Nor is our world cut off from wholeness, left to its own clockwork devices, alone and by itself. Both beauty and reflective appearance formation, exactly as in this image that we have on the screen, both beauty and reflective appearance formation, imitation, and reflective appearance formation, imitation. This is all a long word. Reflective appearance formation, imitation. Lower which is a lower asymmetry and a higher symmetry. There's higher planes and lower planes within through-wholeness are necessary for our world to come into being, to be expressed from divine illumination through its rhythms and forms. That is to say, simultaneously formed within the unity of our own looking, are the infinitely long-range governing automata of reflective form formation, field formation, reflective image formation, participating within living through wholeness, our individual world perspective, our looking, and its flawlessly forming movement through contact is a unity participating within a greater wholeness. Our world perception appears to be formed, brought forth by the innumerable complex self-forming psychological movements of living forming soul and nature. How shall we describe our participation within wholeness and its reflection formation? May we say participation within wholeness may be a certain image or likeness or appearance, a true appearance, a likeness, participating in its blossoming, coming to be within the vastness of through wholeness. Hence, individuals participating within through wholeness possess as their psychological perceiving boundary their formation as being in the world, a certain reflection imitation of unity, of divine illumination. True appearances, such as all humans, all the beautiful flowers on the screen next to us here, the image. Another protea from the Fynbos region on the mountains, southern Africa, possess in themselves complex unity participating within wholeness, who always revolves around an illuminating center point. True appearances and their reflective interformation in time possess their subsistence on the very basis of the forming self-movement within through-wholeness and time. We may view interconnection, the basis of participation itself, with through-wholeness as an internal relation of sense participation through wholeness. Hence, participation within wholeness reflects a certain truth, we may say, that represents with its reappearing rhythm a greater, infinite, and more eternal stability. A single wave appear out of a vast ocean that is in itself indistinguishable from all of the sea and its illumination. A movement within a greater movement, such as a wave-breaking relative phenomenal event in space and time that moves on the account of the movement of wholeness. And when we look at the ocean as one comprehending living being, even the foam in this image, says Sankara, is an intrinsic movement of the whole ocean and has no subsistence without the eternal stability and essence of the One or Brahman. Does it not now seem impossible for true living appearances, waves, lives in time, to possess a subsistence of their own making? Just from gases and unknown things coming together, and eventually this seems like an absurdity. The idea of participation, therefore, is interconnective, implicit within wholeness, such as this beautiful wave. Oops, where am I now? Now I wanted to put the thing on. Such as this wave breaking on the beach. This interconnection through wholeness is an immediate relation realized, formed in nature through psychological contact in our own consciousness. This is a relation of knowledge of the soul that also interconnects us in its highest existence with pure illumination and light, the one beyond words or description, or the good. This participation, we say, is forming within through wholeness, within its interior. For every true appearance forms and makes its appearance in the depth psychology of its creative principle, its formation and movement in time, on the basis of the totality of wholeness and the power and force, the Divine Mother, the power of the creative principle, the Father, expressing the illuminations of the Father in nature and in us, and our perception, the formation of images in our perception. He's a remote analogy of that, inherent within the creative principle. Hence, says Proclus in 450 AD, the reason why we go back so far in time is that there's been a kind of a cut off of these works. It didn't have a continuous development, such as, for instance, in Indian philosophy. There was a stopping point, and so we go back there to retrieve in our memory the knowledge. It is necessary that appearances possess their being within the comprehension of wholeness itself. If then all interforming, reflective appearances of divine imagination, the rhythms of our world, birth and death, participates within wholeness, shouldn't this be a point of investigation into our knowledge, our physics, our mathematics, and our psychological understanding and comprehension of ourselves and formation? Our whole complex unity is self-interforming. We'll come back to this beautiful concept, and always forming through participation within nature and wholeness, the flower. Everywhere we look, our own imagination is the connecting bridge to the formation of knowledge, higher knowledge. It is assimilative and receptive of form, the Divine Mother, and formation within our intellect. It is the forming force. Our imagination is not governed, as we may put it, by the appearance of the operations of right or left hemispheres of the brain or its neural dictates. Our imagination is the receiving power that brings forth all image formations. Our imagination is an aspect of the underlying masculine and feminine automata, the opposing divine energies of higher order field formation, forming at once the whole unity of our participation within wholeness, and is reflected in our sense perception. We may think of our imagination as a stable inner bridge to the formation of higher knowledge, for here too wholeness, knowledge, intellect, formation, and comprehension is a living unity. Hubie and Steele in 2014 observes the following with reference to Priscian of Lydia of around 500 AD, and his paraphrase of Theophrastus on Aristotle. He wrote a treatise called On the Soul, and Theophrastus comments on it, and Priscian picks up on it about 800 years later. But perception encompasses without division, that is, as a unity, the beginning, middle parts, and end of the sense object, the whole image, in other words, and its actuality and complete direct awareness, and together as a whole in the present, and exists directly by way of the form of the sense object. In 500 AD, we observe that there appear to be energies flowing, moving harmonics, through and within the projection formation of all appearances, images in both external and internal image formation, indicating a deeper interconnectedness of divine imagination and formation. Living, most hidden phantasy connects as a receiving and assimilating energy the formation of both these as a unity, undivided within the looking of the looker through contact, sense contact. Hence, internal projective formation do not occur as a footsteps in time or as a point in space through the switching of a transistor, like a 0 in 1, or like a DC square wave that communicates with a microprocessor. It looks almost like a just like that. It's exactly a voltage that switches between a 0 and a 1, communicating with a microprocessor. So here is no AI involved here, living being involved, nor imagination forming. Is imagination forming as climbing up a staircase? As it appeared to us then, formation of image, which possesses being, life, and intellect, soul, knowledge, and life as a unity, is of itself a whole unity, a whole or a unity. For this perceiving formation comes to us at once. We may say that the automata of form fields of our own receptive, assimilating, forming imagination or fantasy are then bringing forth form or living images reflecting off of the surfaces of external objects of sense. Aristotle, for instance, described this fantasy as passive intellect. That was in 375 BC. This should be understood as imagination, receptive and expressive of form and image. The psychological corporeal automata of the projective forming power of our fantasy, or our own self-forming, moving intellectual perception, governs all sense formation flawlessly. Hence our own internally forming projections brings forth the experience, the appearance, the flowing phenomena of form and figure in our perception within the world perspective of every human being. The experience of our own world through sense contact, our flawless congress with the phenomenal world, a forming unity within the cognition of the perceiver, is simultaneously the formation of and affirmation of the world as it appeared to be for us. This projective, forming, perceiving imagination, therefore, creating this very image on the screen, forming, indistinguishable from our intellect, being its power. Intellect and imagination is subsisting as a wholeness and as a forming unity. May now we say intelligence, imagination and vision, hearing and so on, our looking and perception are an indistinguishable world image forming complexity. That is to say, a unity self-formed in the world perspective of the looker. For if we account for the unity of our own intellect, our imagination, and its forming movement, it appeared to us that psychological formation seemed not to conform to what we hold to be determined in a single bit or neuron. By itself, it makes little to no sense. Thus we think that reduction of such unified things are arbitrary and trivial. All these are instantaneous, corporeal automata of image formation in the mind of the perceiver. Indeed, we may maybe not say this, that it seems difficult to conceive with these images, these things before us, that the world could have at any particular time been without being, the illumination of being, life and intellect, consciousness, form. For it is the very center point of illumination proceeding through all worlds. Of course, we do not know fully what this implication would be unfolding to us in every new formation of life. For most ancient sense appearance, forming, imagination, always is a unity with the external and internal forming, moving media is very complex in our world of suche, of the soul, and of the psyche, and of appearances or images of our own perception or consciousness. The imagination, therefore, constitutes in a flowing, moving, forming a unity with the creative principle. The internal, interconnective, assimilative bridge between the external world of form and formation and sense contact and our internal world of formation. One unity, and is the inner passage or inner port to higher knowledge within us. Seeing our self-forming, self-reflecting world perspective. Seeing our self-forming, self-reflecting world perspective. These are all interconnected within us through individual, universal, and yet still higher eternal existences. For this illumination announces itself throughout the world with its illumination, within every forming being. Around its light, the soul revolves with her self-movement. Hence, as we said earlier, to look is to form. Divine vision, to see, is to form, to bring forth, to bring out, to bring into the world manifest form, expression, in all its all-abundant multitudes of perspectives and its abundant happenings within through wholeness. This is the true practice of contemplation and the inner port or passage of our imagination. Priscian of Lydia comments on Iamblichus, and he lives in 250 AD, major Platonic, Neoplatonic philosopher, He says this of imagination. It is evident from the treatises of Theophrastus before mentioned, which discusses conformably to the doctrine of Aristotle, is something different from sense, and also from opinion and every rational perception, judgment. Besides, a sense is moved by sensible forms, being vitally excited, meaning in the manner of internal illumination, and energized about them act about them according to the production of its proper reasons. Production and reason here means logos, sound, vibration. Thus also the fantasy is excited by sensible form, external coming in through the eye and the ear and the hearing, proximately using these as subject and energizing about them. In this comes from a different modern perspective in 2002 of Finnemore and Dillon. Links below. Hence too, says he, the fantasy is a corporeal material life, Jan Bleekers, and does not energize without corporeal instruments, eyes, hearing, and so on, since the sensible form by which the imagination is moved are perfected from those external impressions which appear in the instruments of sense. He says, the fantasy adheres to all the self-moving powers, the forces of the soul, and invests all of them with figure, image, that is, projective perception or appearances. It also fashions, that is the maker of, the former of, similitude of forms, transmits the appearance or impressions of some powers of the soul. There's many complex powers in us, in our world, to others, exciting in opinion, judgment. It's one power that's connected to the lowest part of us, an opinion without forethought or consideration, the illuminations from sense, and following forms, all flowing forms are illuminations of the good. But in the second place, says he, the fantasy introducing to the well-contemplative psyche, opinion, the illuminations of intellect. That is to say, internally received from a higher intellect, in itself receive images. Let's do this over again. In the second place, the fantasy introducing opinion, the illuminations from intellect, a higher plane, in itself receives images from all things, and through its own characteristic is properly designated according to receiving and assimilation. Very ancient. The universal fantasy, there is a higher and lower fantasy, indeed fashions, forms, and expresses all the energies of the soul, of conscious, of the illumination of the one, accommodates through receiving and assimilation the external to the internal, and inserts in the lives extended through the universal body, the whole body that enfolds nature, the impressions which descend from a higher intellect. Hence, it is very properly conjoined to the other powers of the soul, preceding them and affording a beginning to their energies. Hence, too, says he, the fantasy is a corporeal. Oops, I think I've gone back here instead of. What is this? Oh, my goodness gracious me. Let me just see what I do here. I need to go back. See, oh, we've done that one. The next one is, sorry about that. My hand accidentally touched the mouse. Nor, says he, is the fantasy passion or motion, but is an impartible and indivisible and definite power or force of formation. Nor is the imagination figured like wax, like an impression. In those times, the Caesar, the Roman emperor, had a seal ring, and he impressed the documents with his ring, and he uses that as an image of what it isn't. But it is excited to the judgment of imaginable forms, appearances, by its inward intellectual powers, according to the production, the logos of assimilative reasons, and assimilative logos forming. Logos sound, the formation is the forming language of the fantasy, the resonant code, if we might use modern terms. He goes further, commenting on Iamblichus, Priscian, unlike these the sense perception in the eye, the imagination is not moved only when sensible objects are present, but once it is moved, it can be roused in itself, meaning that when I visit the place 30 years later, or 40 or 100 years later, then it automatically brings back the memories of those things we hold. And with sense perception, it shares in what is an image. It shares in what is an image, in images and divisible. But imagination transcends sense perception by bringing forth from itself images, even when what moves them is no longer present. By divisible, he means the analogy we could use if there is a right angle, and with the intermediate, I can't get, I'm confused with my left and right, with the intermediate, the obtuse angles in between divisions. That's what an analogy of what he means. In late antiquity is a perfect, so the right angle is a perfect geometrical universal, reflective of psychical unity and strength. It may have become evident from this presentation that our fantasy and our imagination is a distinct and irreducible unity with the creativity of self-forming, reflective formation of being, real existence, life, force, consciousness, expression, form, intellect, creative bliss, celebration. For imagination is a force or power of creative formation, through which every appearance formation is a celebration. The beautiful flowers next to this. An announcement, a logos, a formation of logos, sound, of the irradiations and illumination of the One. May we say that the purity of our imagination is intertwined with and underlying all corporeal appearances, habits, for it also forms ourselves out of the same mold, form. Habits, field automata, forming all cognitive and neurobiophysiological movements of our soul's circumscription of spirit, body and mind, of the wholeness of nature, including the plants, the birds, and everything else we see. Our own imagination is the interforming bridge to self-knowledge and wholeness, for we are interconnected appearances, likenesses participating within through wholeness. Indeed, the flowing forming of our world, such as these images of flowers, of animals, of humans, stars, of birds, are manifest forming as reflections, appearances within greater wholeness. All of nature imitates through forming appearances, reflecting its participation and interconnection with the good. Does it not seem now that our interconnection with wholeness and with nature is within our own looking, the unity of it? Indeed, the more we investigate the anthropological history of our species, in quotations, the more we find they came into being at once and without any prior history, such as these beautiful flowers in the image on the screen. There is the good professor, he's on evolutionary biology, Professor Steinberg at National Geographic. I'm going to put a link to his YouTube in where he basically says, I'm summing what he's saying here, but you know, the problem is people have lost their jobs. They've been called idiots by professors because they don't agree with their viewpoints. This is really helpful in our forward-moving scientific investigations, calling each other idiots, fools, and this because we don't agree with them, their positions. It really cements your position, does it? It seems then that the flawless forming psychological sense contact of the looker and his beautiful at restness within the world images formed through his looking is what he or she lives for and accepts for the wonders it offers him, the beauty it offers him. This is our own interformed psychological world as it appears to be. It is the nature of true imagination, a creativity of world formation in us. Nature and her flowing forming appearances like the images reflecting off of the surface of water. Self-forming images of our human imagination is in their formation an instantaneous, world-affirming unity. In the beginning of the video, we said this. Maybe I'm going to play it one more time. Reflective, harmonic, imaginative formation is governed by projection itself, formation, similar to the analogy of field harmonics of the pull string of a lyre or the back reflection of harmonics of a bowstring of Plutarch. For it seems indeed to us that projection and imagination always is forming, bringing forth, and is a principle to creativity in us, a formative unity within the formation of all our world appearances, forming likenesses like the appearances on this polished surface of the sphere. We accept the appearances or images forming within our reflective world perspective or frames of references as they are. No need to look any further. Would we not say that it is projection itself that governs the internal and external intellectual by psychological interformation of phenomenal world appearances within each individual frame of reference? We said that nature herself interforms through our sense contact and our own looking, color, and image. An instant forming harmonic appearance of the unity of our own nature as beings. For this formation includes our own bodies, minds and being, soul, our own living experience. Wonder about this for a long time to come in the future. Look at this wonder. Hence it appeared to us the imagination of nature becomes flawlessly the self-reflecting participation of the consciousness and the dimension that beholds it, through sense contact, and is a unity forming in all frames of reference. It appears further to us that our own receiving and assimilating imagination is an operation in every fleeting, fast-moving judgment. Every judgment is a fruit most deliciously eaten, says the myth. There's consequences of judgments. Our own looking possesses the inner potential to bring forth new forms of knowledge within our self-understanding, and it is through the forming realization of our imagination and knowledge that our world moves forward. For the whole of the movement of every appearance is a movement, a progression to perfection within wholeness itself. This world This would be a true progression to a future time, the principality of our psychological world movement. The progression indeed of the perceiving boundary of our knowledge and the movement of our consciousness. The human soul, a principality, a complexity moving through time, rhythm, formation and participation. Wholeness is within itself the interior leader of our perfection and of the progression of our human soul to a future time. But the ultimate illumination within through wholeness is super-essential being itself, of which our ignorant self is a remote resemblance. Being holds in itself all forms and is the center of the stability of all forms rhythmically forming in time. There's death and renewal, but form is stable, and the source of the stability is being itself. This true enchantment with illumination is the worship of the good in us and a celebration of nature. Thank you for watching our videos. Subscribe, smile and love, and we'll see you in the next in our next video on the Phantasy. Until then.